All right, it's been kind of a tough week. So George here, that's me, and Larry here, that's him.
That's not me.
There he is. I was going to start with a lot of jokes because it's been a rough week. I can't remember the last time we had a good week in this country, but we have a bad week. Okay, so this is Citizens Going Wild, and I'm going to tell you some jokes. How important does a person have to be before they're considered assassinated instead of just murdered? Do you have to be a government official? Maybe that wasn't that funny. What about a round pizza? Why does a round pizza come in a square box? These are George Carlin jokes, and I thought that was pretty good. What disease does cured ham actually have? May you have any ideas on this? You are welcome to pile in. How is it that we put a man on the moon before we figured out it would be a good idea to put wheels on luggage? If a deaf person has to go to court, is it still called a hearing? All right. Here we go. Why do people pay to go up to tall buildings and then put money in binoculars to see how things look at the ground? I did that at the Empire State Building. I did it with my kids. Here's one you might be interested in, Larry. Why do doctors leave the room while you change? They're going to see you naked anyway.
No comment.
All right. Here's another one. Maybe you can join in at any time. Why is bra singular and panties plural? No one knows. All right. No one knows. No one can care. All right. Why does a Goofy stand erect while Pluto remains on all fours? They're both doggies. No ideas? Okay.
Ask Disney.
This is kind of creepy here. If corn oil is made from corn and vegetable oil is made from vegetables, what is baby oil made from?
Obvious.
Why do they call it an asteroid when it's outside the hemisphere, but call it a hemorrhoid when it's in your butt? You know, you might, if you go back to practicing medicine, you might use that as a kind of a, tension.
No. Yeah, you got the right word, practice.
Oh, really?
Never mind.
All right. Why does someone believe you when you say there are 4 billion stars, but check when you say the paint is wet? I always check that. Here's one that you might be able to answer. Why do they use sterilized needles for death by lethal injection?
They want to make sure they did it right.
Okay. It just seems more civilized. Why does Superman stop bullets with his chest but ducks when you throw a revolver at him? I was just watching the military channel, and I'd like to know the answer to this one. Why do kamikaze pilots wear helmets? It's like when people skydive, they have a helmet. If you fall from a mile up, I'm not sure it'll help that much. All right, here's one. If people evolved from apes, why are there still apes? May? No? Okay. Is there ever a day that mattresses are not on sale? No? Okay.
That's the day to buy. That's the day to buy.
Here's a good question if you're retired. Why do people constantly return to the refrigerator with hopes that something new to eat will have materialized? All right. I do this too. Why do people keep running over a string a dozen times when they're vacuum cleaner, then reach down, pick it up, examine it, then put it down to give the vacuum one more chance? I do that at the same time. And here's one that flusters me, and I've been meaning to ask the manager of my supermarket this. Why is it that no plastic bag will open from the end on your first try? All right. statistics on sanity, you might want to listen to this, Ming, is that 1 out of 4 persons are suffering from some sort of mental illness. Think of your 3 best friends. If they're okay, then it's you. Larry, we get together with 4 people all the time. All right. I wanted to mention, although I don't know what I wanted to say, about this spa rampage, which is so morally grotesque. And but I'm not sure what to say. At first I was going to say, why did the media push so hard to say that it was anti-Asian? And then Ming told me an idea, which is, he went into places that were known to have mainly Asian or only Asian people there. But you said something that's very important that people don't understand about guns. People mainly consider guns in a set way. Each time we have the same discussion. But you mentioned something interesting, Larry. If you don't mind, tell people about your experience.
Uh, okay, without going into any great detail, excuse me for 1 minute. I didn't want to do one. Without going into any great detail, my family has unfortunately been touched years ago by a tragedy involving guns. And I am not for outlawing guns necessarily. In spite of that, I am for what I consider to be a logical evaluation of the needs for guns, that they do serve a place in many places in American society, but that they need to be well controlled and well regulated. We take a tremendous care in making sure that a person gets a driver's license in many states before making it adequately prepared and trained, and at least initially. We don't do that for guns in many cases.
Do you think, if I may say so, and if you feel uncomfortable, I'll cut this piece out, but we're talking about suicide, and I'm wondering, people have no idea how many suicides there are because of guns, and one thing is, people know, if I want to commit suicide, aha, I need a gun. But also, it's so quick and easy. You don't have to walk to a bridge. You don't have
but there are different things. First of all, some people will not do it that way because they do not want to disfigure themselves in any way, shape, or form. Those are the people who would probably rather take pills or something of that nature. But if you look at the number of people, unfortunately, who have died by suicide from guns, and compare it to the number of people who have been killed every year in the United States by guns, not suicide, I think you would find it a small number.
But do you think it would be easier to sell the idea of taking simple, clear measures to check on the person before they buy a gun?
Oh, absolutely. But again,
more people would be for taking little steps, such as background checks, if you sold the idea that we need to do it to stop suicide, rather than the idea that we want to take away your gun.
I don't know about that. I don't think most people really think about suicide one way or another, unless they unfortunately happen to have either a family member with mental illness or a family member or somebody who they know who has gone through this tragedy.
Okay, all right.
I do agree with you that we need to stiffen gun laws tremendously, but I do not agree that we should ban guns except for certain people.
I am for gun rights. I think the founding fathers put it in there for one reason. They thought that's the last barrier between tyranny and not tyranny, and they were serious about that. They were very
Sure, but look at but George, you got to take it in the context of the time. I mean, most able-bodied men back in the 1790s knew how to shoot a gun, knew that had access to a gun for protection. There were very few police forces, if any, and those were pretty poorly trained. And so, in order to protect yourself and your family and your possessions, you needed a gun. Nowadays, times are different. The forefathers, great as they were, couldn't see the future of 200 years or 300 years.
Yeah. I personally don't think anything is going to be done this time around.
I don't either, because I think that the people who are after the gun control, some of them are asking for draconian measures, and I don't think that's going to buy.
I think at the very least, we should have a background check
And a 30-day waiting period. And a waiting period, absolutely.
King told me that there's only a 1-day waiting period in Georgia, which, I mean, I don't see how.
In Florida, I don't know what it is now, but it used to be you didn't even have a 1-day waiting period. You came back 2 hours later and there was your gun.
Well, that seems a little extreme, but
that explains a lot of things that happen in Florida.
Yes, it does. Although it doesn't explain why you go to the supermarket and there's an alligator in aisle 3.
Well, they're looking for shoes.
Here's something that also seems to, I find it very interesting. Biden's what has been called open borders approach, he wouldn't like that title. Nonetheless, he's letting a lot of people in and telling a lot more people that they won't have to leave. So this is what one person says. Lock down the country, sure. Force restaurants to close, absolutely. Keep schools shut for the year, we must play it safe. Arrest people for peaceful protest against lockdown, done and done. We must use every possible means to save lives, no matter whose rights it violates. Prevent illegal aliens from crossing the border and spreading the virus. Are you some sort of bigot? Is there kind of a contradiction there that we are allowing people in and we're certainly not checking all of them? And why?
We really don't know what's going on down at the border. I mean, I have heard several different arguments. What I do find disturbing is that the media does not seem to be covering it in any way that they did when Trump was president.
Right.
And that the government does not seem to be overly eager to do anything much about it, such as the fact that Biden has not been down to the border yet, as far as I know.
I know he was just quoted today as say he will go down in due time.
In what due time? A year, 2, 6? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen? Are they going to come up with a reform that includes ways to stop it in the future? Are they going to come up with reforms that remove some of the, I don't know, 20 million people that are here today? Or are they going to just...
Look, I think the horse is out on. I think that this has been well organized. I put this years ago because the caravans come up every so often. They came up in 2018 when there were re-elections. Then they came up in 2020 when there were elections. And among the things they heard the rumors that Biden let anybody in for any reason. There is somebody behind all of this. These people do not have the money and the wherewithal to organize a caravan from Central America.
What if it is part of the leftist religion, so to speak?
Again, I want to know who's paying and who's organizing, and it shouldn't be that hard to find. I would think. But then
All
again, I'm
right.
naive. But to answer your question, I put the blame for this on both parties of Congress. There's been a bill languishing in Congress, I think since 1995, to update the 1986 agreement on borders and illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, etc. And both parties have not done anything with it because of their own internal wishes.
You're right. No, you're right. Neither one is, and I don't think either one will. They don't follow through. You remember there was supposed to be an e-verify system, and it was
Right.
kind of wandered away. Now, here's a couple of good news things. In Israel, where they do some neat things, they have come up with a way to dispose of a dung. They have developed a device that converts animal waste into odorless organic fertilizer. I think that is one of the most important contributions Jews have made to civilization.
Absolutely.
Here's another one that's kind of interesting. Boy, it sounds like in Israel they just give everything a try. Okay. They have something called an app which any woman can use. Any woman at risk of attack can initiate a video call to summon help from women nearby. In other words, it's always good to summon the police, of course, but there's always a woman nearby. Certainly with men like you, they would be around. Anyway, so you can just
And what would happen then? So you
well,
summon a woman, what's she gonna do?
well, beyond that, I'm not sure, but you can yell. Most people don't commit crimes if they know they're on camera, I think. Or that person can call the police or whatever. I think it would be helpful.
Well,
They say,
no, I think anything would be helpful. I just finished watching, just before this happened, a video of a 20-year-old Orthodox woman being attacked in London.
yes,
And,
and no one does
had that.
anything.
But again, I don't know, it was videotaped by some camera, but I don't know if she would have realized because she was attacked from behind, a bag was placed over her head.
I think nowadays Americans or people in England would show up. At any rate, it would probably scare the guy away. I mean, there are some people who will go ahead.
I think anything that causes publicity in this, in other words, that takes the rat into the limelight in any shape or form is good. I agree.
I agree with you. I think it'd be very, very good. And it's certainly worth trying. It's not a big deal to set it up. I mean, for me, it's a big deal to turn on the computer. But
again, we're of that generation, George.
yes. The New York Times apparently has an obsession with occupation, and it keeps saying that Israel is occupying land. I want to give what I think is a very good explanation of the recent history of Israel. I'm going to hold up my hand and say this is the Palestinian Mandate. This is the area of the world that we're talking about here. And there was an area called the Palestinian Mandate. After World War I, England was on the winning side. The Turks were on the losing side. So England kind of inherited the land of Israel, the Palestinian Mandate. And they said it would be a good idea if Jews had their own place, which it certainly was true after, the concentration camps. Millions of Jews were killed. No one did anything to stop it. Okay, so here's this little piece of land here, about the size of New Jersey. And it was supposed to be given to the Jews. Okay. Now, England was involved with all sorts of shenanigans and foreign policy and imperialism. And at one point they realized we want oil. The Arabs have oil. The Jews have none. You remember the mistake Moses made of making a left instead of a right. So we're going to take 78% of the land and give it to the Muslims. And that place is now called Jordan. It's not an old country, it's a new country. And the Jews looked at it and said, well, that's a loss, but still, we have a little place and we'll live in peace and harmony and prosperity, we hope, with our neighbors. Okay. Then the Muslims came along and said, look, we would like part of that land. And England, still thinking of oil, I guess, said, you know what? Why don't we give the Muslims half of your land that has been promised you? And the Jews said, you know what? It's not good, but it's the best offer we've had in 2,000 years. We'll take it and we'll live in peace and harmony with this little piece of land about the size of New Jersey. And the Arabs said, well, basically, fuck you. We're going to kill every one of you. They said it out loud over and over and take over the land. And the only way you'll be here is if you're buried under the sand. 5 armies attacked Israel, and Israel fought back and won. The Jews fought back militarily and they won. And that surprised a lot of people. So the Jews said, look, we won, but we want to live in peace and harmony with you and prosperity as well. Why don't we get together and talk? And the Arabs said, we're not going to talk to you. We're not going to recognize you. We're not going to negotiate. Nothing. Go to hell. We're going to try and kill you and take over that piece of land. And they did, sometimes in a big war in 1967, other times in a big war in 1973, and in between by blowing up people, suicide bombing, and all sorts of things like that. It didn't work. So Israel now has control over a certain amount of land. Not this much, but maybe this much. And so when people say the Jews are occupying it, you can only occupy a country. There is no other country out there. And despite what is being told or not told on television news, the Israelis are not occupying because there's no such thing as occupying unless you're occupying a country. Also, the Arabs often say, look, my grandfather has a key to his house. First of all, if you want to prove you own a house, you show people your deed. The key is nonsense. The key means you don't own the land, but you'd like to fool some people into thinking you do. Those keys can be bought for about $6. They're souvenirs. They're not real keys to real places that were owned. If there was an Arab, a Muslim, who owned a piece of land in 1900, he still owns it today. There are 20% of the Muslims in Israel are citizens. They own land. They own land. And other people who have a deed indeed own the land. No one takes it away from them. Jews are like that. They are strictly legal folk. So any Muslim that owns land anywhere in the area controlled by Israel owns that land. They can build a house, they can build a school, they can build a playground, anything they want. They still own the land.
George,
Israel isn't documenting occupying diddly. Go ahead.
Some of these questions I'm going to ask you out of ignorance. Some I'm going to comment on, if I may. May I? Okay. Number one, I will argue, and I'm all for Israel, but I will argue that number one, the Palestinians never had a Palestinian state. It was actually Jordan that was given to them. And if they want anything, they should be going to Jordan, not bothering Israel.
That's great. That's absolutely right. Somehow they managed to fool a lot of people into thinking at one time there was a state called Palestine, and that was where Muslim Arabs lived. There was never a state called Palestine where Muslims.
Oh, Palestina was actually a Roman term for the whole general area.
Right.
But there wasn't, as far as I know, a Palestine state.
No, never. Why do you think people believe that there is, though?
Oh, wait, that comes to a bigger question, and that is why do people believe the Arab Muslim narrative, and why has Israel, who has done so well in so many other things, done so badly in the court of public opinion over the years?
I don't know. And there's so many Jews in public relations. I don't know. I think because the Muslims have got the attention and the support of the media and academia, and they just repeat it over and over and over again without, and that's by the way,
In other words, the big lie.
It is a big lie, but if
Right.
you repeat it often enough, there you have
Now,
it.
but the other thing is when a country conquers another country or area in another country, they tend to keep it, and they usually force inhabitants out. This has
Absolutely.
happened through numerous wars throughout the years, and even in recent times, and nowhere except in Israel do you see people saying, "Oh,
Absolutely.
poor."
I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing that up. Israel is the only place where they win wars and they have to sue for peace. It's absurd. I haven't heard anyone say we ought to give back land. What about in this country? Should we have 50 states. Why not give 10 states to the Indian, 1 state to the Indian? But we don't.
Wait, but all we know, now with indigenous Indian rights, we may. You never know.
That's true, but
In our lifetime, though.
basically they're confined to some of the worst land that God has created on this earth. And no one ever thinks of it doing that. And people just, I mean, this must be annoying if you're an Israeli. All over the world, people are saying we ought to do this and this with Israel. No one says we ought to do this and this with Russia, with China, with
Right, exactly. I don't see anybody making a big thing for Chechnya that the that the Russians occupied 5 years ago or 6 years ago. Just as an example.
It is
And what even worse is that now the Muslims are inciting the Bedouins in the Negev to demand that the land is theirs and that they want Israel to give it back to them, and they are basically squatting there and daring the Israelis to push them out.
Exactly. And to show you the power of the media, which is, I think, the main answer to your question, look at this. Right now in New York State, the Governor Cuomo is under pressure because he demanded that nursing homes allow people who are afflicted with COVID to come in there. Okay.
To take them back in.
Right, that they come back in. Okay. Now there are other governors that have done this. Newsom of California, Whitmer of Michigan, New Jersey, by the way, Pennsylvania, all had the same thing, but we're only focused on one state. Why?
Wait. I can answer that a bit, if I may. Number one, during the beginning of the pandemic, Andrew Cuomo was a media star. Many people listened to his daily briefing. He was concise, he was abrasive but appropriate, etc. What I find fascinating nowadays is now that he's under attack, and rightfully in my mind, for sending people back to nursing homes because they didn't change that policy for a long time. And by the way, the other governors that you mentioned are just as guilty. But what I find fascinating is now that he's only under significant attack from this, of all these accusers come out, these women come out to accuse him of sexual inappropriateness. What were they 6 months ago? The same, he had done these things already to her.
Again, it shows you the power of the media. Well, let me go on for just a second here, because there's something I found out. I did not know this. Everyone knows who Colin Kaepernick is. His parents are white. They adopted him very early on. And they love the poop out of him and he loves the poop out of them. They're a very tight family. And I don't know what that means, except that it's kind of nice. And it just startled me.
Well, I think they're on both sides. Number one, I am sure that Colin Kaepernick is being blacklisted because he can play far better than a number of quarterbacks who are playing nowadays in the National Football League.
Well,
but number two, the other side of the coin is the fact that he had several contracts worth multiple millions of dollars. I don't know how much of that he donated to Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, but yeah, I just thought that was fascinating. I don't think what he did was that bad, actually, at all.
I'm unhappy with all these people who kneel during the games, et cetera, when they play the national anthem. Number one, because if most of these people, if it wasn't for the modern gladiatorial sport that we call football, instead of gladiators like in the old Roman time, most of these people would be out in the street and working menial jobs because they're bred to play football. They know nothing else. Most of them have the intellectual capacity of a 10-year-old.
All right. I agree. I wanted to read one more thing here. There's a lot of talk about asylum. When we use a word over and over again, I think the media is obligated to tell us what is the real definition of the word. And it comes down to this. Under the asylum law in the United States and the asylum law of the Geneva Convention of 1951, asylum seekers must show that they have a well-rounded fear of persecution due to their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. The overwhelming majority, it's estimated 80% of the people seeking asylum here are economic refugees. And I'm not saying it's any fun to be poor, but this is an important matter. When Jews sought to flee, no country would let them in. And if this happens again, and it has happened a number of times in Jewish history, I would like to think that Jews would be allowed in because we have this law. But if this law continues to be misused, people will turn against it and it won't be available to people.
George, I don't think you can have any law you want in books. I think that when it time comes for the Jews to need to emigrate anywhere, I think that they will find ways to abrogate this law. That's number one.
You may be right, but
number two is that I'm not sure that I agree with you that 80% of the asylum seekers are economic, although I do agree a large percentage are. I also think a number are fleeing instability in Central America, which is riven with gangs.
Okay, and why do you think, though, that in the United States, we have sort of forgotten about this law, the U.S. law and the Geneva
We
Convention?
only remember those laws that we want to remember.
Oh,
unfortunately. But let me ask you this. Why do you think the United States, how come the United States all of a sudden, I mean, given you're downtrodden, you're poor, etc., you're yearning to be free, which you find we cannot take care of our own homeless and poor and mentally ill and indigent. How can we take care of the world?
I agree entirely. We let in 1 million immigrants every single year, which is more, as far as I know, than any other country in the world. We have a way you can be admitted. But I think the reason we do this is basically, look, if you take away Hispanics, a non-existent category of thought, there's no such thing as Hispanics in any other country in the world but the United States. You take away the Hispanic votes from the Democratic Party and they have no party. I think they saw years ago. Let me just finish this. We need new citizens. We need, and people who are allowed in, that we allow in, especially if they come in illegally and we still speak up for them, they will vote for us. And they need continuous new voters, and that's why they're allowed in.
I think you may be right. But what's interesting is historically, the lower class Hispanic, if I may use such a term, and I don't mean it in any derogatory sense, has been very conservative. They basically listen to the church. They basically vote very conservatively, and one would seem to think that they would end up being more Republican than Democrat.
In the long run, they will be. That's what this last election showed. If you ask Hispanic the same questions you ask white folks, they have an almost complete overlap. The only reason they will vote Democratic now is because the Democrats will give more goodies to recent refugees and more welfare, which new refugees go for. But once they settle in, they tend to move a little bit more to the right. Their family values are not the family values of
the left.
Of the left, and their views on immigration aren't even there. I was talking to this Hispanic guy, and he said, "Look, here's a problem. I don't like to be under attack, but the fact that there's someone else behind me who will take my place and do the job for 10 cents or a dollar less puts pressure on me. I don't want open borders."
What other nation has open borders?
Well, I don't know any, though.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to end right there.